everyone, welcome back to Show Me How to Win. Today we're visiting Bruce Schlickbernd to ask him to tell us about power grid strategies. Bruce is actually a 3, maybe 4 times World Power Grid Championship tournament winner. Bruce, tell me about this tournament.
There's 3 of them during the year and 4 days each. So with that, you play 12 different maps of Power Grid. So we are doing the World Tour, which was great when there was only 12 and there's now like close to 20. The winner gets a free pass to all the conventions for the next year. I often turn that down to get the $50 dealer dollar.
Since you're such a experienced Power Grid player, and Bruce is actually one of the players that I play board games with very often, but nobody ever wants to play Power Grid with him because you just lose. So we've never played Power Grid together, but I've always knew that he's a great player. So, I thought we should just ask him to contribute to my website, write the strategy article for Power Grid, and also do a little interview to talk about the general strategy of Power Grid. So, Bruce, Power Grid, we're talking about the base game here.
Yeah.
What should we do at the beginning of the game as a general opening strategy?
At the start of the game, what you have to do is make your initial placement. And what you want to do is try and fence off an area that you can get at. Mm-hmm. So you have to try and kind of fence off stuff so that people aren't tempted to come in behind you. Mm-hmm. If I come in here, people don't want to come back there because it's too confined. It's also better sometimes to place multiple cities so that it becomes a bigger, tougher barrier to get through. It's just more intimidating. If you don't do it that way, if you only put down one, sometimes people will just start crowding in on you. One player loves to use a set of 3 of these, and will make sure that he puts up a definitive barrier and has plenty of power plants to start with, or cities to start with. Mm-hmm. The downside to doing that, is placing a lot of those, is it sucks up a lot of your money, so you don't have the money to bid on the power plants. And it also puts you into a disadvantaged position on the turn order. The more cities you have, the worse you are in the turn order. You start having to choose first for your power plants, you buy your supplies last, and you place on the board last. Well, it doesn't matter about placement right away because you've taken the ones that you wanted. You're only concerned about the power plants and the fuel.
So what you're saying is in the beginning of the game, so for example, if I'm the yellow player, which I never am, I'm always the red player. Okay, so say this is what I want to. This is where I start with. I don't want to start right towards the edge of the board, but I don't want to. I can't start in the middle anyway. So I kind of want to start somewhere not too far from the edges, so that if people come and try to block me off, I still can go towards other areas easily. But if they don't try to come and fence me off, then I can start to move towards the edges and give myself a good regional bonus that way, right?
Yeah, really what you're trying to do is do 2 things. One, keep areas reserved for yourself, but also make sure you have avenues to get out. Sometimes you can't get out until step 2 when the second city sites open up, but you still want to be in a position to get to the ones that are cheap. Anytime you can save money, money is power.
What are some of the things that you can do in step 2? Like what to do when you're kind of feel like you don't really have a direction when you're falling behind, or maybe you're kind of ahead. What are some of the things that players should think about when step 2 is triggered?
Big question is, are you going to try and move forward strongly and power up as many cities as you can and get as much money as you can? Mm-hmm. You can do this easier if you have bought very good permanent power plants. They're cheap to run and they power up a lot of cities. If you have those, you have a lot more options. If you don't have those, It becomes more difficult. It will always depend on how many people are in the game because that changes the dynamic of when the game ends. Mm-hmm. The game will end on 17 cities for 4 players, and it goes down to something like 13, I think, for 6 players. 15. It's a number of them. But that will mean that as that number you need to trigger the in-game changes, you can afford to keep smaller and smaller power plants. Because you can only have 3 power plants, and if it needs 15, well, then you're going to need an average of 5. Well, you can get away with a 4 and a 6 and a 5, and that'll make 15. Even if you can't power them, if you can build the cities out that far, you can still trigger the in-game. These ones are very efficient because it only takes 1, and this one either accepts coal or oil. So you have your option of buying whichever one's cheaper. It's harder to run out. It's possible for the entire fuel market to be bought out. If you don't have fuel, you can't run it. It doesn't matter how many cities you have on the board. So ones that don't cost much to run become very efficient and saves you money.
Okay, what if you're not choosing the strategy because you're not ahead of the power grid? You haven't really the power plant. You haven't really bought any good power plants, and you're sort of towards the end of the turn order, which in power grid is actually not a bad position, right? Can you tell us more about staying behind on the turn order?
Staying behind, it's like the tortoise and the hare. If you are early in the turn order, you can buy everything cheaper, so that saves you money. That catches you back up. You can wait on buying your power supply or your power plants until everybody else is bought, perhaps, and then you get whichever one you want that's left for the base price. You don't have to bid for it, so that saves you money. If you're moving first onto the map itself, you can get the best routes and save money. So there's a catch-up mechanism built into the game, so don't panic if you're behind. You will catch up to at least a certain degree.
Okay, so now we are moving on to step 3 or phase 3, where all the big power grids are coming out, and it's pretty clear who's ahead in the turn order and then who's behind. So what are some of the strategies for the people who are behind on the turn order, or what are some of the strategies for people who are ahead on turn order?
The big thing at the end of the game is the finish, and that can be triggered simply by building your number of cities up. You don't have to power them. Nobody else has to power them. It's just whoever can power the most at that given moment wins the game. So there are several ways to approach it. You can just simply buy everything that you need, have it all set, and then just power up more than everybody else. This is great if you got lots of money. And there's not necessarily a lot people can do about it if you're that far ahead. The big trick is if they believe that they can't make it this turn and they got to go to next turn. And when that happens, they win the game. What you can do is force the end of the game on them, which is you build out to the required number of cities and you power them up. It doesn't matter if it takes 17 to trigger in-game and you can only power 14. If everybody else can only power 13, you win the game. And you can catch a lot of people out that way. I have been behind many times and caught people out with that. They just did not realize that I had enough money to do that. What you have to do is try and keep a running count of how much money it will take for you to get to that magic point. So if it takes like an average between the city costs and the connections of 25 per city, and you need 6 cities, well, that's $150, or electros as they call them. These are electros. And if you can do that and you say, I've got 180 electros, that's enough. Well, everybody else might be building in front of you. And so your costs go up. So you kind of have to figure that in. So that's how I do it, is I try and keep track of how much I need, how much I have, and can somebody else do this? Because they can catch you out and do the exact same thing. So you always have to watch and say, well, I'm moving early in the turn. I'm placing my pieces down, and I want to sandbag behind them and stay down here at 10 rather than be up here at 12. But then you're looking and say, well, he only needs to build that many to go out to trigger the end game, and he has more than me at this point. If he does that, he wins the game. I'm going to have to at least move up to the same space he is. If I'm at the same, it'll be the cost in money. Well, if he's built all those cities, he's just spent all of his money, and I'd beat him. So you always have to be careful on that.
So it sounds like, you've talked about this before. It's a very tactical game. At any given time, depending on the board state, the money state, the turn order situation, also how the power plant comes out, you have to make a decision based on what's going on and what you can do or what you can stop people from doing in order to sort of plan your way towards victory, right?
Another thing that you can do is the fuel market. If you can run out a key fuel that the leader needs, if they can't power it, they don't get any credit for it. So, and also it could be another case of it's so bad and you're badly positioned that you won't be able to buy it next turn. You may not even want to run your power plant that turn. The idea is if nobody's going to end the game, you're better off accepting less money that turn and be in a position to win the next turn. You have to be able to power those power plants up on the last turn. So a lot of the game is being able to figure out when that final turn is, when somebody's going to force it or when you can force it. And that is, controlling that is a big key to winning the game consistently. It's a very, very tough game to master.
Well, Bruce, thank you so much for showing us the strategy, how to win at Power Grid. And thank you guys for watching.